Bottom Line on TVP World, where we unpack some of the main business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Marie Cato. Today, the European Commission announced a new action plan for the European automotive sector. As a matter of fact, the joint press conference of Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, and the CEO of Renault is just about to take place. However, a couple of hours ago, Apostolos Tzitzikostas, the Transport Commissioner, already announced some of the measures worth up to 50 billion euros. Before we get into a deeper discussion of how these policy changes should boost the European car industry in the months to come, let's take a look at a feature prepared by our reporter, Jan Kennedy.
Once the backbone of the economy, the European automotive industry has been facing a perfect storm, losing competitiveness, market share and shedding jobs. That's why the European Commission has decided to step in with a new initiative.
It is a plan to keep Europe's car makers, suppliers and related service actors innovative, competitive and firmly anchored in Europe.
Driving the recovery efforts will be more than 50 billion euros in funding allocated to support the 27 nation bloc's action plan. It is based on 5 key pillars: innovation and digitization, clean mobility, competitiveness and supply chain resilience, skills and level playing field. In addition, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Monday announced that the EU will give more time to car makers to comply with new emission standards, which were supposed to come into force this year.
Companies will get 3 years. The targets stay the same. They have to fulfill the targets. But it means more breathing space for industry. It means also more clarity, and without changing the agreed targets.
New targets require auto manufacturers to lower emissions by 15% compared to 2021 levels. The consequences for not complying with the CO2 emission objectives would have been dire.
The companies may pay up to 16 billion euros. So all in all, there are things that we should do on European level not to worsen the situation and worsen the global competitiveness of our industry.
And then there's the issue of ceasing production of cars with internal combustion engines at all, a feat the EU wants to achieve a decade from now. But experts are sceptical whether this will be feasible.
Requirements for the manufacturers to make only electric cars is going to go away. So that's going to be one relief for them.
Right now, in an effort to cut costs, European car makers are increasingly looking to relocate production to countries with lower labour costs. China has been a key player in this strategy for over 2 decades, and this has now come back to haunt European producers.
For many, many years, European manufacturers have shared technology with China, have been building vehicles there. They were quietly looking at this technology and basically making things maybe even better and cheaper than the Europeans. And so we have a situation now where the market is oversupplied.
And while for years Chinese-produced cars have been of a noticeably lower standard compared to their European counterparts, some Chinese automakers have now caught up. On top of all these challenges, last week US President Donald Trump reaffirmed the EU, including its automotive industry, will not be spared from 25% tariffs imposed on automotive imports. While Central and Eastern European countries known for being major producers of vehicles as well as components might not export directly to the US, they will be affected.
Lots of our suppliers supplying the German OEMs, and Germany with Italy or also Slovakia exports a lot of vehicles to the US. So through Germany, our companies will be impacted.
The European Commission has said that it will retaliate if tariffs are imposed, but it's open for negotiations.
And now to get into the details of the new action plan that will be rolled out for Europe's car industry, I'd like to welcome Krzysztof Frelek, CEO of the Polish Automotive Group, an association of car part manufacturers, to the show. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us.
Hello.
So let's just start with what is troubling European car manufacturers? Can you give us 2 or 3 of the main problems?
Yes. the manufacturers are struggling with the regulations that were imposed on them to abandon ICE engines or our standard bread and butter engines for many, many years and switch to electric motors. This was not driven by the demand of the customer, but the regulations. So unfortunately, the regulations came only from one side. They were forced the producers to prepare those vehicles. At the same time, there was no incentives for the customers. So the manufacturers were forced to spend a lot of money, and the market is not there at the moment. So they are in a very difficult situation. And from what we saw right now from the discussions in Brussels, the targets still remain the same. There is a little bit more flexibility. We'll see how it's going to play out. Until we somehow force the customers to buy the vehicles, I don't see a situation improving dramatically.
But some argue that there's the issue of mismanagement, especially with Volkswagen. That's been something that's been
yes, there is. But the question is who is the mismanagement, how it is forced. We also have a huge labor participation in the management of Volkswagen through the ownership stake of the Lower Saxony state and strong workers' council. And this particular example, I think it's not very, very particular in the sense that they never really went into restructuring. I believe Diess was the one who was trying to do it. It did not happen. He was forced out. We have no layoffs in German workforce. German workforce is the most expensive in the world at the moment. So when you think about it, the productivity in the United States is about twice as high as in Europe per capita in general, right? And here we have more expensive workers in Germany than we have in the United States. How they can be competitive? Yes, there is a mismanagement in a sense that the reforms were not taken earlier.
Well, we had a German car industry analyst at the end of last year, and he said that Toyota is able to produce just as much cars as Volkswagen, but they employ half as many.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. You need to let go half of the people who are producing the cars in Germany. But this was sustained by their success in China, which ended in now a couple of years. Yes, that's why I believe this is a particular example which is not actually representative. Unfortunately, it's the biggest producer.
The big news of the day is that we have up to 50 billion euros to boost the European automotive sector, which includes 1.8 billion for battery manufacturing and 1 billion euros for connected and autonomous vehicles and batteries. How would you say that stakes up against the industry's problems? Good news, bad news, exciting news.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, in my opinion. Any kind of subsidies, we already had subsidies for Norvolt, and we know how it ended up. Hopefully, it will be used properly and not to prop up ailing manufacturers, essentially. If we give 20 million to Volkswagen, we pretty much can figure out what's going to happen with it. We're going to have restructurization going not now, but in 10 years down the road. So I'm not 100% sure this is the biggest problem, money, but competitiveness. If the manufacturers will be competitive, the money will always come from whatever sources. So it's a specific to Europe, how we try to resolve the problem. I don't know if it's really the benefit to the taxpayers or to anybody else.
Well, with Norvolt, it came a little too late, didn't it? Because they filed for bankruptcy towards the end of last year.
Well, yes, this was exactly.
Okay. To what extent do you think that today's announcements will actually strengthen the European car industry in relation to China? Because apparently what makes you competitive when it comes to China's the ability to produce reasonably priced EVs?
Well, I think one of the key factors is also that China has no legacy manufacturers. So they didn't start 100 years ago and evolve, and they didn't have to restructure. In Europe, we have to restructure, we have to get lean, we have to get efficient. It's very difficult with behemoths like Volkswagen and any other company like this to do this restructuring. We did not use, I can say we didn't use properly, but it's obviously debatable, the time of the 2008 crisis, where when you look at the United States, they restructured seriously their automotive industry, and it's much more competitive than what we have in Europe. We have not done this. We kick the can down the road for another 20 years, and we're back where we should have resolved it a long time ago. So I believe that we need to restructure. The funds are not the most critical, but we need to help in restructuring the industry and agreement. It's with political agreement essentially for restructuring.
The Europeans are losing to Chinese manufacturers because there were no affordable EVs, but now we have a bit of an offering. We have the Fiat Grande Panda, we have the Renault 5, the Renault Twingo, the Volkswagen ID.2. So the landscape is changing. How would you comment on that? Where do we stand?
I would say it's getting better, but when you compare to the Chinese prices, it's still way out of line. It's still twice as expensive, basically. Compared to the Chinese offering. So I think it still will be difficult. Our factories are interestingly not efficient enough, but I'm not sure if it's on a factory level. I think it's the whole system that is not efficient, and it has to deal with the legacy system. So until we seriously restructure the whole production chain, I think it will be difficult.
Okay, so just to wrap up this part of our conversation, how do you view the announcements in relation to the problems that we're facing?
I think it's a little bit of a coating, but it's not going to resolve the major issues. It's, again, kicking the can down the road. As somebody said here, in 2035, probably the target of stopping production of ICEs, I have serious doubts if this is going to happen. So I don't believe it's going to help a little bit, but it's not tackling the main issues bothering the industry.
So it's just a Band-Aid for the time being?
Absolutely.
Okay. But we have the postponement of the emission standard until 2028, which I suppose maybe comes as a little bit of a relief. But some believe that this action plan is actually the consequence of some unrealistic targets that were implemented under the Green Deal that actually harmed European car makers in the first place and actually helped these foreign rivals. And now the EU has to pick up the pieces. What are your comments and thoughts?
Yes, this is, this was the only way to extend right now because, as I mentioned before, the customer is not ready to buy those cars at the prices that we can offer. So there was no other way. I mean, obviously you can impose, it was between 2 and 5 billion euros, which would basically wipe out any profits that the company has, which they should invest in development of the new product. So it was just simply unrealistic, and to me it's no surprise at all that we had to postpone those, and I would expect them to continue evolving those targets.
Mm-hmm. And in only a decade, actually, the EU wants to be producing solely electric cars. I'm curious to actually ask your opinion. Do you think that consumers are actually that keen on electric cars to begin with?
At least for now, we don't see it.
Exactly.
And I think it's a very interesting example. In China, we have about 50% of electric vehicles. So it shows that it can work. But there are consumer preferences, there are specific behaviors, and use of the car is different in United States, it's different in Europe, it's different in China. So those needs to be adjusted. I think it's technically possible because probably the future is in electric vehicles. They are simpler, cheaper to build. Obviously, batteries is still a little bit of an issue as far as the cost is concerned, but that will be coming down. So overall, the electrification of mobility is the future, but the speed of it, that's a completely different question.
German MEP Jen Giesecke said that the Commission was wrong to put so much focus on electrification. We want to defend a technology-neutral approach, which means that you have to not ban any technology. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely subscribe to what he said. I believe it's... We don't need more regulation in Europe. We need more deregulation and more freedom for people to make their choices.
Choose what they want, okay. And do you think that if the Green Deal perhaps was implemented at a different pace, would the European car industry be simply in a different place right now?
100%. There was...
Perhaps if the industry itself was prioritized, we wouldn't be where we are right now.
There were billions spent to meet the targets. And it was foolishly spent money. And when we're talking right now that we're going to have, you said 80 billion, right, going to car manufacturer, this is a small down payment of what they had to spend already. This is like paying back a little bit of what was done by politicians or forced on the companies to spend. So.
Now moving on to tariffs, we see that Donald Trump is moving forward with his tariffs. Do you see that this new automotive policy is perhaps a means of simply surviving the tariffs that are coming or taking the industry to a new level?
We're speaking in the afternoon. I don't know what will be in the morning. So with Mr. Trump, it's difficult to say what's going to happen. I think tariffs are very difficult for our industry because the logistics chains crisscross all over the world. So it's very hard to find, to easily define where the part is coming from, and where the value really is created. I think it's going to be a tremendous issue, especially for the United States and Mexico and Canada, because as a matter of fact, most of the vehicles are produced over there. We're going to get ricochet in Europe because some of the vehicles are produced here, and some of our producers, being at Volkswagen, BMW, they have serious operations in Mexico. Also in the United States, but Mexico is becoming more and more important. Part suppliers are much more located, I would say, in Mexico. So it is a serious issue, but I think at the end it's going to get resolved when we're going to have the results of those tariffs. So if we're going to see inflation going up, probably in the US, and also inability to sell the products because they're going to be too expensive, inability to manage the logistics chains, all of those issues are going to, impact the decisions of essentially Trump, because it's hard to say how many advisors that he has there, or he's making those decisions himself.
Okay. And just as we wrap up, a final question. There are some comments coming out of the EU that the decisions that we see now rewards the laggards and creates uncertainty over the bloc's commitments to the green transition. Do you agree with that? What are your final thoughts?
Excuse me, can you repeat the question?
That the decisions that we see now, that we are able to delay, especially in regards to the CO2
of the Commission.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Does that actually reward those who are less committed to the green transition?
In a certain way, you can say yes. Those who did it faster. Today I saw comments from CEO of Volvo. But Volvo is a Chinese car manufacturer, so they have a sort of a preferential treatment.
Sure.
I think it's a complicated. It's not a simple. Unfortunately, there's no simple answer to that.
Okay, Krzysztof, it's great speaking to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we were joined by Krzysztof Frelek, CEO of the Polish Automotive Group. Thank you so much for being with us today. I was your host, Marie Cato. Join us every weekday afternoon for The Bottom Line at 5:10 CET on TVP World. And for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. And for more news and analysis, stay with us on TVP World.